Okay, well, it is 12 noon where I am. Welcome, everyone. Wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our June, what month are we in? June webinar. I'm Susan Harrell, and I'm the Director of Sales Enablement here at Neovation Learning Solutions. And it is my privilege to program this webinar series for you all. Um, so a little bit of housekeeping up front before we get into the proper introductions. Um, we'll please use the chat to ask questions throughout the session. We'll try to deal with some of them in real time as we go through, depending how they fit into where Philip is in his presentation. And if not, we'll make sure that we heard them all up for questions at the end. We'll make sure there's enough time to work through everybody's question. If it is a sufficiently complex question, we may defer and Philip might reach out to you privately at the end, just because sometimes questions can be very specific, but we'll make sure that all of your questions are answered live or immediately after the webinar. So it is there will be a survey that pops up at the end of the webinar, and it's really important to us, please, if you wouldn't mind filling out that survey when it pops up. It really helps us with programming future events, telling us how we did, so we can always seek to improve what we do for you. So you didn't come here to hear me talk, at least not this time. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Philip Giles. Philip and I have worked together for longer than either of us care to admit, through two companies in a variety of different roles. He is one of my most trusted and valued colleagues, and I rely on him for his expertise in both software and AI. And he'll be speaking to you today about how to buy SaaS software, because that's one of the things that Neovation sells. So who is Neovation? Just to put Philip's role in context, he's a senior sales director here at Neovation, where we sell learning solution platforms, we sell custom content development, we sell all manner of consulting and advisory services to help you maximize your e-learning experience for your team to improve your online training. And I mentioned that he's an expert in AI. He's also very excited to start being able to talk about our new upcoming product, which is Joy Suite. And we are going to be doing our official launch webinar for Joy. You're hearing it here first. This is the first public announcement for Joy Suite on July 16th. We'll be doing our introductory webinar. So you will get the deck with the login information. We will give you many emails and opportunities to register. Joy Suite is something very unique and different in the space. It is an AI-infused knowledge management and learning management system. We're very, very excited to bring that to you. So Philip, of course, is the Senior Sales Director and will be able to answer any questions about all of that. But today he's here to talk about how to buy software. It doesn't necessarily have to be LMS software, but any SaaS software, because it is a beast unto itself and a very challenging buying process. So Philip, with that, thank you so much for doing this with us today, and I will hand it over to you, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Susan. It is my pleasure and my privilege to be presenting this and talking with you today about how to buy SaaS software. To give you a little bit of context as why I know anything at all about it, across my career, I've done a couple of different things. One significant on the buying end, one significant on the selling end. And so I think I've got a pretty good perspective as to what can go wrong from both sides, or both parts of the buying and selling team. And my hope is to give you some pointers, maybe something you didn't know, and some thoughts as to how this might run successfully for you when you look at buying SaaS software. I'm going to pick when I do some examples, I'm going to pick them from the LMS, the learning management space, because that's what we do. And so I can speak to that more than I can to other different platforms. But bear in mind that, the same thing applies to buying a CRM or an ERP or any of the different software platforms that you might want to buy. But why is it important to even talk about this? Because most people regret the software that they buy. Most people, just the majority of people, see some business impact, but not everyone. So we're spending a lot of time and a lot of money buying software platforms and either regretting it or not seeing what we wanted out of it. That's what we want to try and solve, because from a sales point of view as well, that doesn't work. Clients who aren't happy with what they have or haven't seen the results they want to, doesn't work for the company that's selling something, as well as not working for the company that's buying something. But why do people regret it? Handoffs. So someone sells you something, it then goes into implementation, and the implementation person doesn't know anything about the conversations that you've had. That's a problematic piece, and that happens frequently. Mismanaged expectations. So what you got doesn't do what you thought it was going to do, whether that was something that was explicitly promised or something that was a thing that you just understood would happen and the salesperson clearly didn't. Costs can be higher if they're not explored right up front, and implementations as well. A significant proportion of people don't enjoy their implementation. One of our philosophies here at Neovation is we want you to enjoy the process of doing as much as anything else. So the implementation should be a pleasure. Difficult, sure, lots of complex moving parts, but it should be a process that you don't resent as the lowest possible bar and that you enjoy as the top. That's really what we go for. But buying SaaS software nowadays is hard. It's hard to sell it, it's hard to buy it because it takes a long time. Many more people are involved than used to be involved. It used to be 2 or 3 people would make a decision about what piece of software to buy, and the rest of the team would just kind of get told that that's what was bought. Many more people involved now, 6 to 10, depends. At the smaller business end, 6 is more realistic. At the enterprise end, 10 is optimistic. Could be 15 or 20 people involved, almost all of whom have the ability to say no to you internally if that's something that you're wanting to do. So there's a lot of alignment that needs to happen there. And because of all the alignment that needs to happen, most software purchases don't actually happen. Most times when an organization looks at, or an individual within an organization looks at buying a piece of software, they end up not buying the software. And it's not usually for financial reasons. It's usually due to lack of stakeholder alignment internally. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a buying framework, 4 phase. I mean, it's an arbitrary number, but these represent the things that you'll be doing. So what are the problems? Who out there could solve that? How do we choose which one? And what does it look like to actually implement that software? And how can we make sure that that is successful? So let's start right at the beginning. Why are you looking at buying a piece of software? What's the thing that you're trying to solve, and why are you trying to solve it? Do you have those requirements listed? Have you thought about the future? And dig into a little bit more detail about each of these pieces right now. So in buying a piece of software, or buying anything really, it's really important to get at what the real problem is that you're solving, and make sure that when you're working with the organization that you may or may not be buying it from, that it is clear to them what the problem is that you're looking to solve and why you're looking to solve it. Sounds trivially obvious, but typically during the course of an organization looking at something to buy and digging into more detail, a little bit more detail, and other stakeholders popping up, what the actual problem is changes. But the person who's selling it may not have heard that. So how do we solve this? Spend a lot of time up front, much more than you want to. When I'm buying things, I want to dive right in and start playing with stuff right away, and touch it, feel it. I don't want to spend time figuring out the why. But if you want a successful buying process, particularly with software, digging into the why is really, really important. How do you dig into the why? Well, you don't stop at one why. Why are we doing this? Why does that matter? Why does that matter? Why does that matter? Why does that matter? Some of you on the call, and I'm recognizing a couple of names who I know this, the 5 whys really helps you to get at the reason why you're actually doing it. Not the symptoms, but the cause. And then looking at that across different departments. So everything that you're doing, how it affects this team over here, and this team over here, and this team over here, and then business costs. What is this costing us? Because if it's not costing us any money, you're quite likely to get to the end of all of this and then no one wants to write a check. CFO isn't going to be willing to write a check that doesn't achieve a business outcome. So it doesn't either generate money or save money. And particularly today when those are really, really strongly held reins by a CFO, something to bear in mind internally, that you need to try and get that business case built as quickly as you can. And the people you're working with at the vendor should be able to help you do that. But let's take a look at digging to the core of a real why situation. As I said, we're talking about within a learning management system. So we need an LMS. Okay, why do we need a learning management system? Well, only 62% of people are completing a course. Okay, well, why? Why are only 62% of people completing it? Well, because they can't access it when they need to access it. Okay, why can't they access it when they need to access it? Well, because it only works on a desktop during business hours. Why is that a problem? Well, because people are remote, people have flexible schedules. Okay, so why, coming back now to the beginning, why do we care? Well, we therefore need this on-demand learning to produce increased productivity and increased retention. So the real problem is not let's find an LMS, but we need something that's flexible and accessible because our workforce is distributed and we need to make it easy for them to access the training that we're provided because of the business outcome that we're going to get. So if you dig into all of these pieces during the course of your purchasing experience or your purchasing process, then you'll really get at the why. And you may find out, odds are you will find out, that at least one of the things that you are looking at, the reason is actually different or irrelevant, or there is a new reason for why you want to be looking at things. We have any questions so far, Susan? Nothing so far? Awesome. Okay. Okay. So you've asked all of these whys, and you may be one person in a team. You may be a researcher who's been asked to go out and look at learning management systems, again, CRMs, ERPs, whatever, in order so that the organization can buy one. And that's great. And you may have got to some of these whys, but now who does this impact? Who do we need to look at in order to make sure that everyone is bought in? So thinking about that possibly 15-person group of people who can all say no at some point in the process. Thinking about bringing them in as early as possible. So IT, because they can absolutely say no to just about every piece of software. Finance, again, legal, because they can both absolutely say no to any piece of software. So having those people in right at the beginning of the process means that, one, you don't waste any time at the end of the process when legal says, no, we just can't buy something like that because of these privacy reasons or something like that. If you have them in the beginning, one, you may not ever end up spending the time to buy something, or two, when you do get there, the stakeholders from legal, finance, IT, etc., have been there right from the beginning. They know where you are, where you're going, and it makes those final steps that much quicker. And trust me, your software vendor, if they're doing their job right, is going to be asking about those people from the beginning of the process. They're going to be asking, hey, who from finance, who from legal, who from IT needs to do something to make this happen? Okay, so we've thought about the team that we need involved. Now we need to think about, what do we actually need to do? So do I need to manage in-person training and track completions of those? Am I just delivering online training? But if I'm just delivering online training, do I need to think about grouping the training together? Do I need different groups of different training for different people? What does a instructor-led training instructor need to be able to do? What do they do now is a great way of starting with that process, and then asking them about what doesn't work and what does work with how they do things now. Moving on from that, once you've documented everything, I know I've skipped over something that takes a long time, but getting at use cases and digging down is important. Looking at different priorities and trying to start bringing people together across this. So involving people across the whole team in detailing those use cases. The more you get people bought in to begin with, the easier the whole process is going to be in the end, though it doesn't feel like it when you've just been asked, hey, could you go take a look at LMSs because we might be interested in buying one. Okay, so some sample types of use cases and so on that you might get might be, so for example, for HR, you need to track compliance training. Well, that's a legal requirement more often than not, but within compliance training, what do you need to track? Do you need to track when people start it, when people finish it? What does HR care about in that circumstance? Typically a really critical requirement because it's a legal requirement for reporting on that. So what does reporting need to look like? What will make HR happy? From a sales point of view, maybe the sales team's going to need mobile product training. Again, that's a high impact piece because it impacts revenue, so top line numbers. But what does mobile product training access mean? Does it mean traditional LMS style training? Does it mean that they need to be able to access documents and read up on product? Does it mean they need something in between that they might be able to get with an AI driven platform that's delivering some knowledge on demand? Getting at what do the sales team need to be able to do and what does that mean? And then looking at the IT team might be things like, what does integration look like? What does security look like? What is an IT requirement? Because typically IT, when you're talking about buying software platforms, is not going to want anything that increases their workload. So things like single sign-on, things like user provisioning, things like easy documentation of security so they can go through their security checklist easily. These are things that IT would look for. So within each of these, I've got here some high level quick requirements, but you'd want to drill down into much more detail, as I gave some examples of within HR, within sales, and again, within IT. Look at everything that you're doing across all the different departments, and then start thinking about this is what we need now, but what's going to change? Great example of a change, though it wasn't foreseeable, was 5 years ago when everyone went, or everyone, a lot of people went remote. And training requirements, for example, changed very significantly, very, very quickly. But then with organizations moving back into offices, that was more foreseeable. And so needing an LMS, for example, to be able to manage that transition, you could look at what do we need right now and 18 months time, what might we look like? Are we expanding to the US from Canada? Are we developing a new product? Are we bringing marketing that was out with an agency back in-house within the next 18 months? These are all the types of things that stop you regretting a purchasing decision because you bought it thinking about the future. And again, the vendor partners that you're working with should be asking some of these questions to help you understand their importance. And I'm going to put my sales hat on for 10 seconds and say, please don't get exasperated with them when they ask questions like that, because they're not trying to sell you more things. What they're trying to do is make sure that you don't regret what you're buying, because it still works for you 18 months later. My wife and I once, well, several times we bought a car. I'm thinking of one in particular. And we bought it in a hurry. And we didn't think about the future. And no one asked about, hey, what are you doing in the future? Car salesperson wanted to get the deal done, and I don't blame them. And then 6 months later, my wife became pregnant and we had a family 9 months after that. And all of a sudden, this vehicle that we just bought, that we were paying for another 3.5 years, wasn't really that suitable for us. And this was a totally foreseeable thing because we'd been trying to have kids. So those kind of mistakes, the car buying, not the children, um, are completely foreseeable, something that you can think about. You're never going to know everything, but the things you can know about, plan for. Now digging into a little bit more detail, and I'm going to jump over this quite quickly because you'll have access to the presentation afterwards. But we've got HR saying, hey, look, I need tracking compliance training. And this is the kind of level you're then going to get into from that. So we need to track license renewals. We need to alert managers 60 days before expiration. We need to connect to our performance management system. We need to measure skills against department KPIs to do correlations to see what training is impacting which KPIs, holy grail of learning and development. What do we need to be able to provide for the regulatory environment that we're in? What training documentation needs to exist? What training records needs to exist? How can we dashboard things for managers? And then you go a level down from this and can get into real deep specifics. So it's not just tracking compliance management, there's the pieces under that and then the pieces under that. And so spending some time enumerating all of those pieces when you can by going through the 5 whys for each and every kind of requirement is really going to help you. However, you're going to have a long list of things and a long list of things that you then need to decide as to whether they are must-haves or nice-to-haves. What I always do when I'm looking at lists of must-haves and nice-to-haves is I put the hat on where I say, if I were getting this for free, but it didn't have this must-have, would I still take it? If I would, it's not a must-have. It's a nice-to-have. Now, it may be a very strongly nice-to-have. It may be it's right at the top of the things that if we don't have it, there's going to have to be lots of other really compelling reasons to do this. But from a vendor point of view, from a salesperson point of view, if I get a list of requirements and there are 180 must-haves and 25 nice-to-haves, I know that there is no platform on the planet that's going to meet all of those must-haves. So there's going to be a compromise somewhere because there has to be, because no platform does everything. See this often with RFPs, but please, when you're going through buying software, think about it as do we absolutely have to have this? So a good example might be here where we talked about alerting managers 60 days before expiration. Maybe the software has a built-in 45-day reminder or a built-in 75-day reminder that's not customizable, but everything else works. You can probably live with it at a 75 or a 45-day reminder. If everything else works, it doesn't have to be 60 days. So maybe the must-have would be alert managers before expiration, and a nice-to-have would be the ability to configure that to meet to timelines that you want it to be. Just something to think about there before you end up with a checklist of 180 must-haves. And that's another reason why these software buying projects sometimes stall. Ruthlessly, ruthlessly, ruthlessly prioritize. This is one of the challenges with the recommendation that I gave you, which was go out to everyone, ask everyone about everything, and then everyone is going to want everything solved. Go back to the core problem. Go back to what are we actually solving for? Where did we get at with our 5 whys at the top level? Solve that, and then think about the other pieces. So you broaden out, and then you narrow back down. Okay, so we've got some solutions out there. We know that they may exist. We kind of know where. How do we go about then starting to look at solutions. Now we've got our requirements. So good place to start is look at your peers, look at third-party reviews, look at people who are talking in the space. So people who have credibility because they have resources that aren't just geared to selling you stuff, but are interesting and useful within the space that you're in. Look at these platforms like G2, look at Gartner, Fosway, Brandon Hall Group. You'll have organizations within your industry as well. Look at those because that's a great source of talking to people and saying, hey, what are you using? We're looking to solve this. What do you do? Your peers are a wonderful resource for you there, as are these independent-ish platforms as well, though there's a lot of paid advertising. So, buyer beware, but it's a good place to start. Really, though, peer recommendations. So if there is someone you know who's using the same type of software that you are interested in buying, ask them about it. Say, what do you think? This is what we do. Is it worth taking a look at it? Because a couple of things can happen. They'll give you a real world insight into it. They'll talk about what it was like to go through the work with that organization. And they also may be able to refer you internally within the vendor organization to someone who can best help you, which is enormously powerful rather than just ending up with the salesperson whose next turn it is. You can end up with someone who speaks your language, has worked with someone you know, or someone who is similar. So, two real things to explore, maybe three. One is things like G2, things like Gartner, communities within your industry, and then your peers, people who are doing the kind of things that you're doing, so who will have bought this type of software already. My suggestion is from that, you shortlist. I would suggest shortlisting down to no more than 6, simply because beyond that, it just becomes a feature box checking exercise and takes a lot of time. Ideally, I would shortlist down to 3 or 4 at this stage before you've spoken to anyone, because that enables you to spend time then with those organizations to get into some depth, because they're all going to want to. And let me tell you, if you've shortlisted 15 people, by the time you get to the 12th person, the 12th organization, and they're asking you a bunch of detailed questions, you're never going to buy from them anyway, because you're fed up by then with answering the same questions again, even if they're good questions. So now we've got these meetings set up. Start with discovery. Let the people that you're talking to ask you questions. If they're doing their job right, they'll ask you about what you're trying to do. They'll ask you about why. They'll go through some of the 5 whys with you and then be able to talk about solutions, whether they might be a good fit for you or not. Don't be afraid of people who say, I don't think we're a good fit and this is why. Those people are gold dust because they've identified where you're not a good fit and they're helping you identify whether those things are must-haves or nice-to-haves. Get pricing as early as you possibly can. Now, salesperson is not going to give you precise numbers. So let's say it's a learning management system purchase, talking about that because that's where I work now, and you've got 1,000 people and you may or may not want a bunch of integrations. What you should expect to hear back from the vendor is, okay, so your subscription is likely to be between $8,000 and $12,000 a year, or $8,000 and $15,000 a year, and there'll be somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 worth of implementation costs, depending on what we do. That's a reasonable range for them to give you because they don't know enough yet to be able to get specific. And if they give you precise numbers, then they're tied to them and so are you. And there's all sorts of challenges that can happen then when your needs evolve. But it does give you the opportunity to then disqualify people quickly, because if your budget was $5,000, then that's not a good fit. So ask for early pricing, but be realistic and ask for ballpark figures, ranges. So that's something they can give you. As much as all of this, though, see what it feels like to work with this organization. One of my core beliefs is that people buy for features, but you live with the relationship with the company. So that's what is going to happen a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, is you're living with that relationship. Again, like buying a car, you may really love that the Bluetooth works in a particular way. What you live with, though, is your daily commute of an hour and a quarter from North York to downtown Toronto, and what it feels like to drive the vehicle doing that. So you bought for a feature, one specific feature. What you live with is your relationship with the vehicle and how that feels. So bear that in mind as you're evaluating vendors. Is what's it feel like to work with this organization? So now we've had these conversations with potential vendors. You're going to want a demo. So how do we go about doing that? Ask them to give you something customized, not an off-the-shelf feature dump, but something that relates to, okay, Simon is an instructor-led training instructor. He needs to do these things. Sarah creates e-learning. She needs to do these things. Miranda is the overall director of HR, and she needs to do these things. I have these groups of learners. This group of learners needs to access remotely and search documents. This group of learners needs to just take compliance training. So get into real world scenarios, which you'll have because you work through your 5 whys. And into those demos, bring those people. So bring in Simon, bring in Sarah. If you can in the first demo, bring in Miranda as well, so that they can see what this is going to look like. And they have the opportunity to ask questions at that stage as well. Really, really important. And you'll be able to tell the difference with organizations that pay attention and those that don't. Because if you ask to demo specific use cases and you bring the stakeholders in and the organization doesn't, then I would suggest that they're not listening to you, and that would possibly be the experience that goes the whole way through your lifetime with them. Make sure that these demos are recorded so you can go back to them later, schedule follow-ups, and have a scorecard. Standardized scorecard is important. Feature checklists, yes, maybe you can get the sales rep you're working with to do that beforehand for you, but some kind of standardization of scoring so that it's not all just done on feel. Some other things to look at as you're talking about, as you're working with these potential vendors. Yeah, the software may do this thing, but how easy is it to actually do it? This is why you want the use cases. This is why you want them showing Simon what Simon does every day and comparing it to how Simon does it now and what that looks like and feels like. What's it going to look like in terms of integrating? Maybe you have someone from IT on for the first 5 minutes of the call so that they can have that conversation. Typically, that's a separate conversation. But is it going to fit into your tech stack? And that's why you have IT involved from the beginning. What does the vendor look like? Have they been around for a while? What does their roadmap look like? How are they going to develop things into the future? And what does support look like? Again, you buy for features, you live with the relationship, you live with support. What does that look like? How are you going to be working with people afterwards? Who's in support? Where are they? All important things. Do they work in your time zone? Okay, so now we've been through demos, we've been through feature checklists, we've got people aligned. Now it's time to think about making a commitment. So what do we got to do there? We've got 6 to 10 to 15 to 20 stakeholders who we need to bring together because every single one of them can say no and stall things. Need to look at contracting, need to look at what the actual cost of this is going to be. Building stakeholder consensus is straightforward. Note I said straightforward and I didn't say easy, but it is straightforward because to this point, you've done your whys, you've identified who everything affects, you've brought in legal, IT, you brought in HR as well if they weren't involved from the beginning. And so you know, with your conversations you've already had, who needs to be involved, what they can say yes to, and what they may or may not be concerned about, and what priorities they have. With your shared evaluation criteria in your checklist that we just talked about, you can then bring people together and have that conversation. So, what do we want to do? Who's concerned about that? What do we need to resolve that concern? This is typically the largest single component timeline wise of a software purchase. It's not, you can typically go through use cases, maybe a month. Get the demo organized with discovery from the salesperson, another 2 weeks. But a typical sales timeline for purchasing software like we sell is 5 months. And it almost all takes place here, internal consensus. So in order to do that, make sure that everyone's priorities are addressed, or they're told they're not going to be addressed, right? This isn't the platform that's going to do this for you. Be straightforward. Look at what it's going to cost. Look at what it's going to accomplish. And then think about, from a C-suite, who needs to be involved? Who's going to sign off on this? Should know this already if we've done the work beforehand. But this is the time, if we haven't got that person involved, to get them involved and build a business case for them. Okay, so I'm going to take a step back a little bit now, because we've got here now we talked about pricing, but we really need to look at how much does it really cost? Because living in a house, buying a car, the cost isn't just writing the check for the house or the car. It's what else do we need? Right, so I bought this EV. Well, now I need some integration work because I need a charger to go in my house for it. Okay, I need to change over my insurance. I need to change over my registration. Oh, this car comes with a subscription fee for the remote door unlocking. Drives me crazy, but my car comes with a subscription for the app. All of these are and extended warranties and so on. Same thing applies to buying SaaS, right? It's not just what check do we write day one, what's the subscription? What are our integration fees? Are they upfront? Are they ongoing? What are setup fees? So just implementation. What does data migration look like? I've got stuff in this system over here, need to move it over here. Pro tip, that is the single biggest concern for organizations that already have a platform that they're replacing. It's how do I get my stuff from here to here? Bring it up front with your sales rep. If they can't tackle that, then they're not the right place for, they're not the right organization for you, but bring it up right up front. Are there other things I have to buy to be able to use this? Third-party tools. What does my support contract look like? Is that an additional cost? And then operationally, internally, yes, is this changing the amount of time my team needs to spend doing things? And what else could they be doing? So hopefully in implementing software, you may be saving your team time. So instructor-led training may be able to go online, and there are some significant cost savings from doing that, because you don't have to put everyone in a room. You don't have to do it twice because 4 people didn't show up the first time, etc., etc. But this is why moving from let's say a $20,000 a year solution to a $15,000 a year solution to save money may not actually save you money, because there may be all sorts of things that you have to do now that you didn't have to do before, which is why getting to the use cases. And Simon, our instructor-led training instructor, what does he have to do now? How does he do it? What's he going to have to do in the future? How does he do it? Does this look like less work? Does it look like more work? So getting all of these together for your total cost of ownership. Now, everyone's favorite bit, negotiating and contracting. Maybe you have a purchasing team and you just hand it off to them and off they go. If you do, I still advise being as involved as you can, but you need to look at what does service look like, transparency rather than vagueness. So, for example, a lot of software platforms raise their prices by 25% a year consistently, particularly smaller ones that are growing. Is that something you're on the hook for? Or can they give you a price freeze or agree that they will restrict it to 3% a year or something like that? Push for that so that in year 2, year 3, year four, if you've had three 25% rises, you've almost doubled your cost. So that kind of transparency, and at least you know what you're getting into, and then make sure that the things that you've agreed are reflected in the contract. So if it is this piece of software doesn't do this thing, but the company is committed to saying, yes, we will build that feature out for you, get that in the contract. Okay. So now we've researched, we've involved everyone, we've shortlisted, we've done demos, we've now getting close to or have bought it. Now we need to land. So we've got to have implementation, we've got to have adoption, and then at the end of that, we've got to have measurement. So implementation, the people you're working with should be doing this with you. But what are your goals? When do you want to be online? What does that look like? Who's moving the data? When? What does that look like? On your team, who is going to be on the implementation team? Do you need someone from IT because you're doing an integration? Do you need someone from HR? Do you need someone from legal? Probably not someone from legal, but do you need a representative from the instructor-led training instructors? Do you need a representative from management? They may not be involved in all of it, but so these people are expecting to be part of it. And then think about a rollout being phased rather than the full deployment. But where you can, follow the vendor's implementation roadmap because they've done this hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of times, where you may only have bought this piece of software or this type of software once, maybe twice. Sometimes I run into people who bought them 3 times, but not very often. We've certainly done more implementations than the people who buy from us. So where you can, follow the roadmap that they have, ask them to change it where you think you need to change it, but listen to the implementation team from your software partner because they know how to get to success at the other end of things. And now we need to get people to adopt it. So I'm going through these last pieces relatively quickly because I want to leave some time for questions at the end. But this is all change management. So telling your teams why you're doing it. That why is different for different teams. It's different for Simon than it is for Sarah, than it is for Miranda, than it is for Kevin, who is a help desk person, than it is for, Melissa, who is a salesperson. It's all different. So it's not one size fits all. It is a different approach for each different group of people so that they get the most value. And your partner, your vendor partner, should be able to help you with this because they will know what works to drive that effective uptake. And it's in their interest as well. Continue after that to measure. Know what metrics you have. I mean, for training, it may be training completions. Fine. It might be logins. It might be number of searches if someone's searching for documents. It could be just about anything, but decide what the metrics are, get feedback, and have regular meetings with your vendor. So every 3 months, every 6 months, every 12 months, every week, depending on what the situation is and what you're looking to do. But share with them any concerns, any challenges, things that aren't going as you wanted. Because if you shared from the beginning what these success metrics are, then there are no surprises. They may not be able to solve it for you, but from the vendor salesperson point of view, there's nothing that feels worse than finding out there is a requirement for measuring success that you didn't know about that you're not meeting. because you should have found out about it and you're not meeting it and you may not be able to do anything about it. So the software partner is truly your partner moving forward. So in all of this, start with the problem, not features, problem, why. Evaluate everything. So not just the features again, the total cost of ownership. What does it feel like to work with these people? What does implementation work like? Can I see what a sample of implementation is? And then adoption, change management. Maybe you have a change management team within your organization. Fantastic. They will support the heck out of you with this. But it's not just a case of deploying a new piece of software and saying to people, off you go. Top regret drivers, problematic handoffs. So solution there, evaluate the implementation process, document all of the requirements, mismanaged expectations, document all the requirements, strong communication, higher cost, calculate the actual cost up front, difficult implementation, plan it, assess that as part of your purchasing decision. Really is not just procurement. You're choosing a partner, you're implementing organizational change with all of the challenges that go with that, which is why you have the 6 to 10 to 15 to 20 stakeholders involved. So I'm going to be able to, or Susan, one of the team will be able to provide you with software buying checklist that I put together. If you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, so I talk specifically about learning technology, so Joy Suite, Smarter You, we design custom content, we do implementation services. You can reach out to me, reach out to Susan or one of the team as well. Happy to have a conversation with you. Um, Several different things we do. AI powered knowledge management, Joy Suite, please come to the launch webinar. You'll be excited. Traditional learning management, implementation services, we design and build content. But you know what? I'm happy to talk to you about AI. I'm happy to talk to you about anything in software and learning and development. I've had a varied career and I just love talking to people at this stage of my career. So, Susan, do we have any questions for us to address?
Actually, Philip, we do not yet,
Oh,
but I re-invited everybody to put their questions forward. I have a couple comments or discussion points that we can bring forward. One is about the use of oh gosh, why does my mind lead me like this? Review sites. There we go.
mhm,
Just because I'm on both sides of this equation, right? I buy software for Neovation to use, and I also, am part of the sales and marketing team here. So I see it from both sides. Just a reminder that the order of placement on the review sites is usually paid positioning. So the
mhm,
top 10 people in a review site are not necessarily the best, even if they have all the 5-star reviews. Sometimes those reviews can be incentivized by the vendors. So I personally don't trust the 5-star reviews. I always look at the 1, 2, and 3-star reviews to get a much more clear picture of how users are feeling and to me, in my mind, that removes any danger of incentivized reviews. So I dig deep into the unhappy because it's easy for people to say that they are happy.
totally agree. And lest anyone on the call would think that Susan is review site bashing, those are sites that we've used as part of our marketing as well. So it's
Absolutely.
just knowing what you're getting when you go there. Absolutely spot on, Susan.
Yeah, and the review sites also have a way to check off the features that you're looking for, and that will help distill down a more accurate and
Hmm.
unbiased list of the vendors that will meet your needs, as opposed to
Hmm.
just going to the first page and going down the top 10 people that you can see on the first scroll. They are worthy competitors, absolutely. But you want to dig in a little deeper than that to get
Hmm.
to the heart of the matter. And I'm looking
Yeah,
for 3 different kinds of software right now, so I'm spending lots of times on these sites. So this webinar, as I mentioned in the chat, is very timely for me to learn and be reminded of some best practices. Um, what else did I write down for notes? Um, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, Philip, is asking your vendors the question about how they handle the change of features as they move forward in developing their software. And the thing that I'm thinking about is I've been using a certain piece of software to do a certain marketing function for probably 6 years, and I've now hit the
Mhm.
capacity that that software can deliver for me. So I got a hold of the sales rep, who is now a very different person than the person that sold it to me, and found out that, unbeknownst to me, I'm now on a legacy plan, and for me to move forward with any changes to my account, it's going to cost me 5x what I'm paying. But I didn't know that I was on a legacy plan. So my thought was asking how people handle taking you along as they develop their software. Can you speak to that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there should be regular conversations between you and the vendor partner, software company. Once you have that long-term relationship, speaking candidly, more often than not, when there aren't those conversations, it's often because the purchaser doesn't want to have them because they're going smoothly, things are going smoothly,
Mhm.
or they don't see any value in having the conversation. Couple of challenges around that. One is because they're not seeing value. It means that the organization isn't necessarily demonstrating the value that that meeting might bring to them. But organizations, software organizations, should certainly be communicating frequently about new features, what roadmaps look like, how things are updated, whether there are any changes to the subscription at all. And what you speak to, Susan, is something that is relatively common in the same way as the 25% cost increase a year, or 50%, or 100%. SaaS is a very rapidly evolving world. And very quickly, you can end up on a legacy plan when 2 years ago it was the brand new plan. I've had that happen to me before. It's all about how the organization handles it, right? And whether they are willing to work with you or not. And that to some degree depends on the size and age of the organization.
Yeah, I still haven't seen any questions in the chat, Philip. I think I stole the screen share from
Okay,
you, so I hope that's okay.
that's fine.
Um, So thank you, everyone. We're going to, I guess, wind it up at this point. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. We will send you the recording. We'll send you a list of resources and suggestions. I've written a couple articles in our Neovation knowledge base around buying LMS software, but again, the principles are universal to any kind of SaaS software. So I'll make sure to include links to those. I know Philip has prepared some resources for you as well. And I just wanted to invite you to sign up for our future webinars. As I mentioned, our Joy Suite launch, you heard it here first, be the first to sign up, be in the top 10 to sign up, I guess, is coming up on July 16th. That's going to be followed the following week by a webinar on AI prompt writing specifically for L&D, and that's going to be led by members of our custom learning team, the people who build courses for our clients, so they can share some of their tips, tricks, and best practices. In August, we're going to have a hands-on using AI workshop for different kinds of tools that we're all using, just to show off the capabilities and capacity of the various AI tools that are out there. And in September, we're going to focus on project management in research and development, and our own in-house L&D project manager is going to be hosting that webinar or presenting that webinar. So please stick around for the survey that will open up as you close your window. I would love to hear your suggestions on topics you'd like. I'm now programming into next year already. So help me offer the courses or the webinars that you would like to see. And if you're a specialist in something and think maybe you'd like to host a webinar with us, send me an email, hello@neovation.com. I'd love to talk to you about that as well. We're always looking for people who are willing to share their expertise in the field. So that's it, Philip. Thank you for sharing your expertise and all the work you put into this. And thank you, everyone, for coming out today. I'm going to end the webinar for us all. So please fill out your survey, and we hope to see you in July, if not once, maybe twice. Thank you so much, everyone.